Our guest today is Peter Pomerantsev, a journalist and a writer and also a senior fellow at Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins University. Peter, hello and welcome to the Czech Radio.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start with an issue which came up recently in an interview with Mr. Dmytro Kuleba, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, when he pointed out that in Central Europe, the support for Ukraine has become a very divisive issue in politics, in societies. And my first question to you is if this is specific for Central Europe or whether you can actually see something similar in other countries as well, namely the United States.
Sure. So I live in the US, and the last few years I've been going through a lot of sociological research on this topic. And there's many reasons. Right at the start of the war, there is total support for Ukraine across society. It starts to go wrong when the Biden administration starts to use this phrase, we're going to support Ukraine as long as it takes. So that was a disastrous phrase for all Americans. All Americans like missions, clarity. That's the whole narrative psychology of the country. Yeah. So that was the first huge mistake in terms of how you communicate this country. And to my mind, the Biden administration had a real opportunity to show that America can be strong, effective, and good, which is what all Americans want. That's what the sociology shows. They are desperate for an event in the international arena that showed them that they could impose their will and a sense of morality. So that went away. And then that was the first stage. The issue for Ukraine and Russia in America was always that it was polarizing since 2016, really. It had become a partisan issue. And after a while, that started to reassert itself, yeah? It started to become more of a partisan issue. Mistakes were made by Ukraine to allow themselves to be seen as close to the Democrats and not the Republicans. Very little work was done to reach Republican audiences by the people who cared about this issue. And essentially, Republicans and Democrats see the world in very different ways emotionally. So Democrats are into alliances, moral commitment, standing up to bullies. That was very important to them. So there's like a baseline support for Ukraine. For Republicans, it's much more about showing that America is the strongest in the world. Yeah. And it's not really about Ukraine. It's about standing up to Russia, China, Iran. And Trump started to say he was the one who's going to do that. The problem was this war. He was the one who was going to stop this war. He was the one who was going to be strong. And for that, Ukraine was the problem, Europe was the problem, Biden was the problem. Yeah. So it's not about being pro-anti-Ukraine. It's about where you stand on defining who America is. These are different visions of American identity. A successful communication strategy would have done both. It would have both talked to the Democrats for their desire for alliances, for stability, for peace and order, and it would have talked to Republicans about strength. Nobody did that. Sadly, that is no one's job. Meanwhile, Russia worked very hard.
You mean nobody from the Ukrainian side?
Well, it's definitely not Ukraine's job. No one did it. Media doesn't do it. Strategic communications companies don't do it. It is no one's job. But the other side, Russia, their allies in Europe and America, who have their own interests in Russia, who see Ukraine as an issue they want to get out of the way, they do work this way. They think in terms of information war about everything. They will combine all their assets, online, media, money, business, with one aim. Yeah? And they were very clear about their aim.
The aim is?
Well, the aim in this case was take Ukraine off the table. Ukraine is irrelevant. What matters is rebuilding connections between Russia and America for their other vision of the world.
Is there any clear explanation why the American President Trump says, or at least used to say, that it's easier for him to talk to Vladimir Putin than to Volodymyr Zelensky?
I think this is a mystery that everybody has been trying to unravel for 10 years and nobody has.
Really? You had no explanation for that? Is it the result of a skillful Russian propaganda or something else?
We don't know. I mean, there have been so many books written about this, and, you know, some people believe in plots, other believes in fantasy. I mean, there are, you know, you can always play a kind of a bingo game. like, what's your explanation? I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe all of them, maybe none of them. Maybe he's a guy from the 80s, and if you grew up in the 70s and 80s, the cool thing in that time was showing you could negotiate with Moscow. Maybe it's just that.
You've been studying Russian propaganda for many years. Do you think it has changed in any way recently in the last, say, 2 or 3 years?
I mean, on a very sort of deep emotional level, it's always, I think, consistently since the 19th century, let alone the 20th century, been about a sense of superiority making up for vast inferiority. So we did a bunch of we're still doing quite a lot of sociology in Russia and sort of investigating what sort of messages Russians interact with. And support for the war grows whenever you ask Russians questions about, is Russia a superior culture? Has it been humiliated by others? So this sort of mixture of feeling like the victim and then seeking to impose yourself on others. I mean, that's always been the sort of the psychological core of it, like much authoritarian propaganda. So that deep psychological core, I don't think has ever changed. But obviously, you know, the surface has changed. I mean, when I lived there, they were playing at Managed Democracy. It was about like the sort of cabaret of pseudo-democracy with different parties and, you know, parliaments and elections. It was all fake, but that's what they were playing at. Now they're playing at some sort of, you know, religious fascistic imperialism. You know, that's what they play at now. But the psychological needs have always been the same.
So do you think that there has never been a sincere attempt to establish democracy in Russia? It was always fake, it was always a cabaret, even in the 90s?
So I lived there from 2001, so I can't really talk to the 90s, but no, I mean, I think a lot of sociologists say that there was a genuine belief that something could work, and that ends in 93, basically, with the bombing of the White House. So 89 to 93 is seen as the romantic period. Or maybe even before that, weirdly. You know, 86, 87, 88, when there's perestroika, then there's... Before it starts. Yes, there was a genuine belief in democracy until it started.
Again, if we have a look at what's happening today, do you think that Russia's trying to influence the result of elections in other countries, in European countries?
I mean, this is proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, so I don't. That's not a matter of opinion.
What are the proofs?
I mean, like non-stop revealing of Russian spy networks, Russian disinformation campaigns, financing of parties and movements. I mean, they don't mind getting caught. I mean, this is the thing. They're very happy to show how much influence they have. They don't seem to get very upset when they're caught.
There's been a lot of talk about what happened in Romania and their presidential elections. You're laughing.
Yeah, because this is really like a story of everything that you shouldn't do happened. I mean, it's sort of a catalogue of disasters.
On which side?
Everybody's. I mean, it's almost like a blueprint of what not to do, which has had I hope an ending that everybody feels is genuine and normal. But there was a pretty, you know, if you want a guide of how not to do things, look at America in its reaction to 2016. That was a disaster. And look at Romania. Romania's probably done better than America.
Better in the reaction of the country itself?
Well, they're both disasters. They're two examples of how not to deal with Russian disinformation, yeah? I mean, in Romania, look, we have this bizarre campaign of Hiorescu, where he becomes top of the, becomes top of the TikTok algorithm within a matter of sort of days or something, goes from nobody to the top person in the country, officially hasn't spent money on his campaign, some sort of mysterious campaign. If you have an issue with that, what you should do is you call it out before the election. You do not wait for the election, certify the election, and then suddenly go, oh, actually, we're cancelling it. I mean, it is harder to think of a more corrosive reaction to that will destroy trust in democracy. I mean, it makes me feel that there's a plot by the deep state. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's terrible. And let's be honest, the Romanian Constitutional Court is not full of judges. Yeah, it's just political appointees. So they're not even lawyers. I mean, they're not even real judges. And then when everyone goes like, so what's the evidence? They're like, oh, there's no evidence. We just know. Just like, it's hard to imagine something that is worse for confidence in democracy. At the same time, let's be very clear, it should be the responsibility of the tech company to show what happened. Yeah, you're the tech company. Something crazy, which is really weird. I mean, it is weird, by the way, what happened, has happened on your platform. They're like, oh, no, we don't have to show anyone. We have no responsibility. Yeah? Which is a huge part of our problem. We have no idea how tech platforms work. We have no idea whether TikTok is a tool of the Chinese Communist Party. We know nothing. So we have all these forces, completely non-transparent, from the side of the government, from the side of the tech companies. The people are in the middle going, what the hell just happened? The whole thing is a disaster. I hope now, after the second run, which was won very convincingly, frankly, by Dunn, hopefully society can come together. But the most important lessons are, look, if we have to have some norms and laws around elections, transparency, the role of tech companies. And we still don't know if it was a Russian operation or not. I mean, it's like, in the end, they found a bunch of Turkish bots that had Russian email addresses. That was the extent of the proof.
And it also leads me to another question. If it shows us in any way how powerful actually TikTok or rather social media can be. Is there a question, can it be that powerful, some information operation on TikTok be so strong that it can actually influence the result of elections?
No, but that's the question about communication, media effects. Does any media have any role? I mean, that's a whole science that has given no conclusive answers after 100 years of research. So let's not go down that path. There are so many factors going into an election. I mean, there's one serious book that tried to measure the effect of the Russian operation in the US in 2016, and that's done by the best communications scientist in America or maybe the world, and even that is tendentious. Okay, so look, media effects scholars have spent 75 years trying to work out, do violent movies make people violent? And after 75 years, they've decided that sometimes maybe for a bit. Okay, we're sitting here having an interview. Does it have any influence? Come on, this is a philosophical problem, a social science problem. Does it have influence? The fact is we have to have rules around elections. Yeah? What is a normal campaign? What is allowed? What is not allowed? What is the role of tech companies? Until we as a society don't have rules that we all agree on, we will have this all the time. Yeah? So this is about us deciding what is normal. And then what is the procedure? So that you can't just have the Constitutional Court after the election saying, oh, we're cancelling it for something that we've known about for like 4 weeks, or 3 weeks. You don't certify the election and then cancel it. It's ridiculous.
So if you think that how things evolved in case of Romanian presidential elections, you call it disaster, what should have been done instead?
So before then, if you see something, ideally, it should have been a flag straight away. TikTok, what is going on your platform? TikTok have to say legally what is going on. Yeah? Who is behind this? TikTok officially say we have no political campaigns. They have political campaigns. Yeah? So transparency from the tech companies, where they are legally liable if they do not show transparency. We're not asking for censorship. We're asking for more information. They cannot be black boxes. Yeah? That's number one. Number two, if there is an electoral commission saying We're seeing this before the election. We're seeing irregular activity. We're pausing the election. Before the election, not after it. You don't certify it and then go back. Yeah? So that should have been the order of things, of course. Instead, you have nothing is said, it's all fine. They see the results, they certify them, and then they say there's a problem. I mean, that's not the right order. So that should have been the process. Then there's the communications piece. I mean, if we're talking about, so I don't know enough about Romania now, but what was very clear in America after 2016, the Russian interference became a partisan issue. Maybe that was inevitable, but again, nobody tried. What America missed was the chance to build up a consensus on what is our discourse and what is foreign intervention. Yeah, whether that is Iranian, Chinese, Russian. It became a partisan thing. It became, are you for or against Trump? It should have been a very, very deep process of public education that got people to the point saying, this is our election and we're not going to let other people get this involved in it. Yeah. Instead, it became a partisan issue. It became, whether justifiably or not, it became perceived as people talk about Russia to attack Trump, not because they care about Russia.
Aren't we actually seeing that when someone comes up with the idea, okay, let's have rules in order to protect our elections, our democracy, in a very, very short time, these people are immediately accused of censorship?
Well, that's because a lot of the rules that people come up with are really bad and they're really stupid. So laws around disinformation are going to be, I mean, they're against human rights. I mean, they are against human rights laws. That's why they don't go through very often. So we really have to rejig the debate. Our reactions have been understandable, but incorrect, frankly, and not in keeping with the logic of human rights and democracy. Freedom, this is not about new types of speech. We shouldn't be looking to censor types of speech, which are not already illegal. Yeah? There are already illegal types of speech. For example, I don't know about Czech Republic, but in America, if you send somebody a message telling them to go to the wrong polling station so they can't vote, that's illegal because you are disturbing their right to vote. That was already illegal. You don't need any new laws around that. There is no new type of speech that has appeared that needs new laws. We have lots of laws around, that protect other people's rights. Yeah. What has changed with the internet is not new types of speech. What's changed is the technology. Yeah. The ability to scale, to direction, to target. That is what needs to be regulated. And that is about more information. That is about access to information. That is about understanding this fight we've just had in Germany. Yeah. Did Elon Musk's X inorganically boost the AfD? We do not know. All we know is the AfD were doing so-so on his platform, and suddenly they're super popular. What happened? We don't know. We live in a black box. We live in a society where we have no idea how our information environment, and therefore our elections, is shaped. That is the problem. By diagnosing the problem as content, we've completely misdiagnosed it, and that leads to very silly decisions like, let's try to censor things on the internet, or there is no new laws we need. There are already laws about illegal speech. They've always been there. We've developed them over many, many decades. So that's what we need. Yeah.
So do I get it right that actually, as far as the world of social media goes, we don't need any new laws. We just need to really stick to the laws which exist already.
We don't need new speech laws. We need a whole new regulatory framework around technology. It's the technology that's new. There is no new type of speech on the internet that didn't exist a year ago or 10 years ago.
So what type of new regulation do we need?
So firstly, transparency. Yeah, we have to have, if you think of yourself as a citizen, you should be able to understand online who is behind a campaign. Is this a Russian or is this Hiorhescu? Yeah, you should be able to understand why you're seeing something on an algorithm, why not? Who is making those decisions? Who is behind that? You should be understanding if your content is being suppressed or not, whether you're right-wing or left-wing. You should be able to understand which of your data is being used to target you. You should be able to understand if I see a political ad, is my neighbor seeing the same political ad or a completely different one that's been adapted for him? That is a public sphere. We don't have a public sphere anymore. It's gone. It was always an imperfect metaphor. We just have this dark, fog, poisonous fog. We're all wandering around trying to find each other like Egyptians during one of the plagues, That's where we are at the moment. And because we've always thought about information in terms of speech, we start to try to limit speech, which is like one little dust mite. It's the whole system that is wrong. So that's what we have to start thinking about. And to be honest, parts of the Digital Services Act in the EU one, they get that. There's part of them that really seem to understand this. I don't know if everybody does, but definitely bits of the DSA are the right way forward. And that is, most importantly, that is in keeping with democracy. That is a demand for more transparency. Yeah? Freedom of speech isn't just the right to speak, it's the right to receive information. At the moment, we live in a different form of censorship. We don't understand how things are formed. So we should demand our freedom of speech in that sense. And then we can have a transparent and open public space. And then we can start to have a debate about, is it normal that it is dominated by 2 or 3 companies run by people with bizarre motivations who are not from here? I think that's kind of fucked up. Personally.
Can you actually imagine that those people you've just mentioned really will agree to uncovering the algorithms and that the social media will actually be open about why we're seeing what we're seeing?
So they have to be. I mean, that's the law. But I mean, there's lots of ways to do it without. So their argument is often, but what about our rights? Yep. What about our business rights? There's lots of ways to do it without opening up the algorithm. I mean, you basically show the ins and outs. You show the input, the output. So there's ways around that. There is a question about sort of like safeguarding bits of their precious maths. So yes, that is a negotiation. But look, when we have food, we ask what's on there, so we have rights as well. So it's about balancing those rights. They do have rights as businesses, but we have many more rights as citizens. And especially when you have a business that it's almost like a company that has a huge environmental impact. They have laws then limiting their activity because they have a public impact. What they do has a huge public impact. So yes, there's a public interest. So that's where you do need laws. That yes, they won't do it just like that. So that's why you do have laws. The EU regulation is going in the right direction. There's actually a lot of people in America who want to do this because it's a bipartisan thing. This doesn't help right or left. But it is true, the tech companies lobby very, very hard in America. Now they're trying to use Trump to lobby in Europe.
Is it a key question, an essential question to open up the algorithm?
It's not just opening up the algorithm, it's opening up an understand. I mean, there is no one algorithm. There's thousands of them. It's not like probably, here it is. Here's the magic formula. Yeah. There's non-stop decisions being made. But yes, look, always go back to the rights of the citizen. Yeah? We'll get to the point which algorithms need to be open. Do we just need to know what went in and went out? There's many things that we can that we can get into a conversation about what is their right to keep as their business secret and what isn't. Yeah? We can get into that discussion, but I as a citizen should have the basic rights to understand who is influencing me, how, and of course, as a public, we have to have oversight of it.
Do we need that also? Because it's basically impossible for a human being, for an individual, and no matter how educated or intelligent the person is, that we can actually be trapped into the world of disinformation? Or is it actually within power of one person not to be influenced?
Such a good question. It's such a good question. The easy answer is it's unfair to blame it on the person because, these are systemic things. But the reality is we are all people. And it's a really good question. I can just talk about my personal experience because this just becomes very personal very fast. I don't know, when talking to people, friends, family members who've been caught up in conspiracy theories or an alternative worldview that we don't agree with. All that I've learned is that it doesn't help particularly to fight them argument by argument. Simply because those arguments, Trump is good, Trump is saving the world, whatever, they're not even meant to be based in facts. They're expressions of an identity and a set of feelings. So you can shout yourself blue in the face going, can't you see that Trump is a con artist? And they'll have their own emotional arguments. And I've tried for many years. All I can say, I didn't manage to do it. What I found works for this problem, to just regain a conversation, is to ask instead, how did you get to this point? How did you lose trust in the New York Times, CNN? What's the journey that ended you up here? And then people start telling a story. And then it becomes personal. Doesn't mean they're good people. Doesn't mean I'm a good person. Doesn't mean you agree with them. But you will find yourself talking to a person who usually went through some sort of what for them feels like traumatic experiences. So in America, when I talk to people in Eastern Europe, Russia, it's almost always the end of the Soviet Union. There's this moment of collapse. Their world sort of melts down and they start looking for conspiracy theories to explain the world. In America, I was surprised how many people talk about September the 11th. This moment where everything they trust disappears. Then 2008, they've always trusted Wall Street. They've always trusted the government. All their savings disappear. So they feel defenseless. They feel financially defenseless and security defenseless. And then they stop trusting everything. And in that trustless world, when we know this from so much research, conspiracy theories become your new world. So, and I'm not saying that this is, all that happens then is that you get to talk to a person. And at the end of the day, the role of aggressive propaganda, the sort of authoritarian propaganda, is to strip people of their individuality and turn them into like a crowd, a mob that is supporting the leader. And one that always feels that the leader will do things for them because they're powerless. So all I can say is that first moment is important. Again, I'm not saying that will cure anything. I'm not saying that it'll make you, those people will change, but you will be talking to a human. And if we think about the overall aim of propaganda to create this sort of mob following a strongman leader, but at the end of the day, it starts to destroy the ground of democracy. That's what the Russians want to do. So many of these guys want to do. Cause so much anger, division, that the magic of democratic discourse disappears. Maybe that's the individual way of starting it again. Yeah. Again, I'm not saying that you should see the good in a fascist. Yeah. You might actually find that they're much scarier than you thought. Because you'll find that beneath the sort of emotions that, I love a certain politicians as, really bad feelings, much worse than statements. But at least you'll be talking to a person. And when you're talking to a person, there's a potential of communication, of actions to mitigate what they aim to do. That's the start. The other one, I think, is around agency. Propaganda, the nasty propaganda we're talking about, the authoritarian propaganda. It's always about saying, you're the victim, but you're also powerless and you need the leader to do something through. The leader will solve things for you. And so I think the other great step psychologically to take away from that is by starting to have self-confidence without the propaganda. So start to do things yourself. And that could mean many, many things. But I think that's very important. And there could well be an information component to that. It could be something like you actually can mitigate your own algorithm quite a lot. Most people don't know this, but you can start making decisions about what you see and don't see. Maybe that is already a first step because you're intervening, you're doing something, you're starting to do that. There's a lot of evidence that shows that, or there's some evidence that shows that Reddit threads, which are a different type of social media, where people organize the rules themselves. So they're organizing the algorithm. They're saying what we admit as evidence, what will, what gets unpacked, downracked. Where they organize it themselves creates much more productive conversations than social media, where you're just being pulled into these emotions you don't understand. So just that moment of, we're going to set the rules here, we're going to be the algorithm, is already causes much better conversations than the Sturm and Drang and narcissism and anxiety of TikTok and X. So those sort of things. And no, so we can do things. We can't just say it's regulation in Brussels that will solve it. But at the end of the day, we are, of course, talking about huge media systems that need to be thought about systemically as well.